Welcome to Product Marketing Alliance. We're home to everything a product marketer needs to learn, share, and succeed in their role. The definitive product marketing course, Product Marketing Core, is the perfect platform for experienced product marketers to broaden their existing knowledge, as well as educate newcomers beginning with their product marketing journey. Our community. We're home to more than 10,000 product marketers across the world, and every single day, tons of product marketing specific conversations go down. The community hasn't just been an absolute wealth of knowledge and answers, it's the place for constant inspiration. With a PMA membership plan, everything a product marketeer could possibly need is all in there, all in one place. Whether you want to grab a template, learn about how to become more strategic from product marketeers who've mastered it, sit back and watch hundreds of hours of presentations from some of the world's most trusted brands, our packages have got it all and more. We really are, dare we say it, the one-stop shop.
Thank you for having me. So welcome to Scaling Sales Enablement, Product Marketing Perspective. I thought today I'd start with one of my favorite parts of product marketing, which is storytelling. So one of my proudest and also probably weirdest moments was the day that somebody thought I was a Slack chatbot. Yep, a Slack chatbot. Let me lay a little bit of context here. See, we actually use Seismic for our sales enablement, so go check them out in the sponsor booth if you haven't yet. I'm remote from Los Angeles. We have a global sales team. I'm always sending out a ton of messages via Slack all the time. And so you can see how Sapphire, the Seismic Slack chatbot, sounds like a really, really good Slack chatbot. I was kind of weirded out by this whole thing, but at the end of the day, I was actually pretty proud. Because let's think about some of the attributes of a chatbot. They're personalized, they're relevant, they're accessible, they're analytical, and they're often really human-centered. And so when I approach sales enablement, I'm totally coming from a product marketing background. I have zero sales experience. I'm sure there's a lot of folks in this room who could school me at this, but I think of my seller like my customer, and I approach them in the same way that I would approach the buyer of the product that we sell at Pluralsight. And so in doing that, these aren't bad brand attributes, right? Like I was really, really happy to say, hey, that's what somebody thinks of me. That's pretty damn great. So a little bit more about me. Again, I'm Sapphire. My last name is Reels. We'll be friends by the end of this. You can call me Saf. It's great. I'm a product marketing manager at Pluralsight. I am remote, so it is a cross-functional role. There's a lot of challenges that come in with that, so that kind of colors my experience here. What I really love about product marketing is really understanding how people tick and storytelling. And so that's kind of my perspective. So let's have some Reels talk. I have a lot of Reels talk with my friends. Why are you here, right? There's a lot of product marketers in the room. There might be some sales enablement pros in the room, but generally we're kind of chasing around similar challenges. So it might be, hey, I'm a product marketer and there is no formal enablement function in my organization. There's a lot of inefficiencies. We need to stand something up. It might be around, hey, we're not able to empower ourselves with the right tool. They're not able to win against the competition. They can't communicate value. Deal size isn't going up, whatever it may be. Could be around, hey, our sellers aren't ramping up quickly and we're not able to teach them new behaviors for those existing sellers we have. And kind of what I like to talk about as like the holy grail, how do I actually measure impact? I see some head nods here, so some of this might be relevant. We might have some OKRs around this. To talk a little bit about my specific challenges and where I'm coming from, fast forward back to 4 years ago, I was at a healthcare IT startup called Patient Co. That's me dressed like an alien in the middle there. We did a lot of Halloween things, and it was a very product-focused company. There was very few resources for sales and marketing. Product marketing, I was a team of 4 marketers. It was very, very misunderstood as a function. We had about 5 sellers and they didn't use anything. Like we lobbed it over the wall and it just kind of landed flat. About a year and a half after I left, after I started at Patient Co, I joined Pluralsight. And so I knew that sales enablement was an area I really wanted to make an impact in quick. When I joined, we had a lot of growth. So we had acquired 8 companies in 8 years, which brought a lot of changes into the organization. We were aggressively expanding into new global markets. And with that, we had a new B2B enterprise sales motion. we were moving from not just being B2C, but B2B, but going all the way to enterprise. And we actually had different sellers. We were selling to different folks in the organization. So rather than focusing on selling to HR and L&D, we were actually selling to tech leaders now. Throughout all of this, we were trying to introduce a new sales process. Because we were moving into this enterprise space, we were moving into more value-based selling, which was new for a lot of folks. And there was a lot of disparate systems, no consistent behaviors, and no consistent messaging. To top everything off, all of this was being led by new teams. So brand new CMO, brand new product marketing team, brand new sales leaders. So there's a lot of change in the organization. That was 2.5 years ago. Here we are 2.5 years later. And what have we been able to do? We've been able to create, I want to talk about some of like the intangibles. There's a lot of metrics and things like that we can talk about. But for me personally, what matters is we've created a trusted enablement brand. Our sellers know that they can come to us for what they need and we'll help solve for that. We've created consistency, which is so critical for what we do as product marketers or as sales enablement folks. We are proactive versus reactive. We are able to anticipate what our sellers are going to need. We have much better collaboration, and as we collaborate, we're better able to pinpoint and triage pain points, and we're actually able to attribute the impact that we have. Our sellers are now communicating value and winning against the competition. They're more productive and they're ramping faster. And we're also hitting quota and driving higher deal size in new business. And as a company, we went public. We've increased revenue, we've improved efficiency, and we've expanded globally. So let's talk a little bit about how we got there. We knew going into this B2B motion that we needed structure, we drown. Everything was new, a lot of different changes. This was the perfect time to introduce some of that, and statistics support that, right? If you don't have some sort of framework, structure, process, you can actually lose revenue. And so the first thing I went about doing was creating a framework, and I knew I wanted something that wasn't just a moment in time thing. We were gonna grow, we were gonna change. I knew I wanted something that would allow me to focus on the full program or specific enablement activity. And I didn't want to align to any one tool, right? I didn't want to say, hey, I have to go use this thing in order to do this. So that was the first thing I did. The second thing I did is, as I mentioned, I'm not coming from a seller background. I'm not coming from, a sales enablement job. I built it on the competencies that I already had, which was go-to-market strategy skills, right? As a product marketer, I understood how to build a strong business case, message and position something out, deeply understand my buyer and their journey and how to build a product that works for them. And so I built it on the competencies that I already had so I could get started quicker. So let's talk a little bit about my framework. I am not going to stand up here and say, like, I have this magic bullet. This may seem really obvious to you. What I do want to talk about today is something that's worked for me. So maybe if you are somebody who is in sales enablement and you're working with your product marketing team and somebody just mentioned, hey, product marketing always thinks, like, why isn't sales using this? Maybe this is a way that you can approach them and they'll understand what they need to do. If you are on the product marketing side and you do think like me, this could really help you. For this, I'm going to go deep here. I'm going to be talking about a lot. I'll try to save time for questions. I really like to talk, though, so you can always come find me after here. I'm here for the next few days. And we'll spend most of our time on the first two stages, which is discovery and development, and then we'll talk a little bit about launch and iteration. So as far as discovery goes, let's go back here for a second. So as far as discovery goes, I knew this was a really, really critical moment for us. There was a lot of things that we already knew, but I knew we needed really to dig deeper, right? I needed to uncover the core problems so I could make meaningful connections with my sellers and build a product that they actually wanted to buy. So where did I start? I looked at like business context and data, right? What's our mission? What's our vision? What are our objectives? What kind of, targets do we have as a company? What was past performance? What's future performance supposed to be? I also looked at the sales context. What's their process? What are some of the best practices there? What are their specific targets? What's the quota? All those different elements. And then some kind of non-traditional sources. So we had some surveys. We actually surveyed our whole sales organization off the bat to understand what was working for them, what wasn't working for them. We looked at win-loss data to understand how our customers were experiencing the buying process. We also looked at product NPS data to say, hey, once you were actually sold, how were you experiencing that product? And then we also moved into interviews. So as a product marketer, I'm used to spending a ton of my time in front of customers to really understand how they tick. And so I did the same thing with sellers. I used that sales performance data and I talked to high, average, and low performers. I wanted a profile of all of them. And I interviewed them through the lens of what they do. Hey, take me through a deal. How did the lead come to you? How did you follow up? What did you do to prepare for the meeting? What did you wish you had? How did you actually track the deal? And what I was really trying to understand was where were they spending most of their time on those core selling activities like meetings and actual research and work for the customer, or non-core things like I'm just trying to figure out where to go for communications. The very last thing that we did was shadow sales calls. This was something we were already doing as product marketers because that's how we get a lot of our data on our customers that fuels our go-to-market strategy. This was where we actually gained the most trust with our sellers, and they've come out and told us that because we were able to see exactly what they were experiencing. And it's like, you heard the customer say this, right? Like, I told you they said it. So it gained a lot of trust for us. So we looked at this kind of from a macro and micro perspective and as to what we uncovered. So as I already mentioned, we were high growth, new B2B motion, lots of new teams, lots of disparate systems. But I wanted to understand a little bit deeper in that. So I approached it from a micro perspective, and I created personas for my sellers. And as a product marketer, this is something I understand how to do, how to create this profile, how to take data and come up with these different profiles. So if you're somebody who's in sales enablement, this is where you could really partner with your product marketing team if you have that, and just figured out what the differences were. So like really obvious one, our global enterprise sellers were really used to this value-based selling process idea. Our commercial and small sellers were not used to that, right? So like just finding out what those nuances are to understand how your program may change. Across all of these different personas, one of the things that we saw is they didn't really have high trust in marketing. They were like, hey, marketing does not respond to what we need. And they didn't have the tools available to them. So one of the biggest things they mentioned to us, and nobody actually, like no sales leaders mentioned this, it was actual sellers themselves. They said, we have no way to go out and propose our full platform. I don't know how to talk about the mission and the vision, the capabilities of our platform, pricing and packaging. Like I need the one thing, a proposal, that does that for us. We also went out and talked to influencer personas. In our case, we categorized sales leaders as influencers because we hired a lot of really experienced sales leaders. We felt like from what we understood about the business, we didn't need to spend a lot of time there. But we also went out and talked to sales supporting roles to understand their motivations. So a really good example of that is our sales ops team. They experienced the brunt of bad sales behaviors, and so they were super motivated to help us with this program and drive adoption so they could drive the right behaviors. For our cross-functional teams, a couple examples there is our sales team was working directly with our creative team to get marketing materials created. Our creative team is really, really motivated to have accurate brand representation, but they're not able to prioritize what sales needs, right? They can't filter through those requests, and so there was tons of bottlenecks there. So we created these personas, and then from there, as a product marketer, I message and I position, I come up with those core themes. I really wanted people to know exactly what this program I was creating before I ever started even creating anything. And so for me, the core themes were accessibility and ease of use, right? They felt like they didn't have anything available to them. They didn't know what to find across these systems. So that was kind of one of my core tenets. Consistency and standardization. We're moving into this new market. We need a consistent message. This really needs to be critical, and also on the sales behavior side. Relevancy and personalization. We had a lot of different personas in their sales org, so they needed to be able to find something that was super relevant to them. And also on like the content side, right? How do I personalize materials? And then insights and action, right? We need to be able to act on whatever this program activity that we're creating, we need to be able to act on it for our sellers. So then moving into development, for a lot of you, this is nothing revolutionary here, but I thought about this from a content, a tools and process, a training, comms, and a metric perspective. So starting with content, I went back to that discovery and I actually audited all the content. So thinking about those core themes, right? Making sure there's consistent messaging, making sure that the different content aligns to the different personas and the sales process. So we knew that our enterprise sellers were having a lot of trouble selling in to this new departments in the organization, so we made sure we had persona PDFs. They were facing a lot of competition, which we learned through win-loss data, so we made sure that we had those competitor battle cards. For the commercial sellers, we knew that they didn't really understand the value-based selling process, so we had a lot of tools around sales process and sales documentation. So really making sure not only to tailor our content to our customer, like our product customer, but our sales customer as well. And so we did all of this audit of the content, and then we closed the gaps on that. And so one of the biggest things that we created at this point was a proposal generator, and this is kind of a 2-for-1 special for us because it gave us the ability to communicate with sales, hey, this is exactly how you should be talking about our platform, but it also gave them the ability to tailor that to their specific customers and their deals. And at the same time, it was kind of like, hey, this is for customers, but it's also a teaching tool. So as they went through it, as they read it, as they worked with it, they understood this is how we should be talking about it. This is what the pricing and packaging is. So it worked really well for us. And then from there, I thought a lot about delivery. As somebody who is in product marketing, this is like, I just didn't even know. I just didn't even like think about how much time I would spend on how does this content actually need to be delivered. So when I first loaded it into our tool, I was like, top of funnel, middle funnel, bottom of funnel, and our sellers were like, no, that doesn't work for me. So I tried a lot of different things. And based on how I understood that our sellers were searching for information, I organized it by sales stage. I organized it by role. I organized it by customer goal, problem, needs. So just like figuring out some of the different ways that I could organize that information. A really cool, easy way to kind of get to like, hey, what does our sellers need is to do a card sorting exercise. So it's like give them a bunch of things, right? Pitch deck, 1-sheet cards, and ask them to how would they organize it. From there, we went into tools and process. And so first thing we knew we had to choose a delivery tool because we had disparate systems. We wanted to align it to our core themes. And after evaluating platforms, we ended up going with Seismic because it aligned to those core themes. It was accessible. It was one-stop shop. It was relevant insights. Again, always anchoring back to those core themes that we had created. From there, we had to do a lot of work around tools and process. I didn't understand exactly how much time I would spend on creating process. I know a lot of the times when people hear process, I think like that is the antithesis of like moving fast and iterating. But it was really critical for us to do this, and not just like how do we license new sellers on this tool and get them access, like really small things. The biggest thing for me was actually creating process for those stakeholders that were working with us to build out this program. So where I focused a lot of my time was first on content pipeline. How would I work with the creative team to get all the content we need, get it loaded into the system for people to request new content, all that good stuff. I also looked a lot at communication governance. There was a ton of noise going out to our sellers, and so I took the time to really evaluate all the information that was coming to them. We prioritized it by urgency and relevance, and then we created different distribution channels so it would get routed to the right seller. The final area that I created a lot of process around was a feedback system. Our sellers felt like we weren't responding, so we had content analytics to understand who was using what. We did surveys, those interviews, those shadowing, and then we also created a request form. And then we implemented everything. Make sure you got those project management skills, because I sure learned. From there, document the process. Again, I know, oh gosh, move slow, but this was really critical for us to get those stakeholders to drive the right behaviors. If I'm coming to you in sales ops saying, hey, you need to participate in this program to help drive those right behaviors for sales, they're like, well, what do I need to do? And you're like, didn't think about this part. So I documented everything for them. Another thing that I did, because I am on the product marketing side, I often think about launch plans, and so I tailored our existing launch plan to sales enablement. I figured out what are the nuances of launching a product versus launching a new activity or tool or program for sales enablement, and I built out something so that, hey, now a new product marketing manager comes on and they know exactly what it looks like to communicate a small product update versus, hey, we just brought this really relevant, amazing new piece of analyst content, so they understand kind of what those nuances are. Next thing we did was create a charter. So this is something that we really felt the pain of in our organization is there was a lot of folks doing what sales enablement was and kind of dancing around it. And so what we did is we sat down, we had a sales training and productivity team at the time, and we sat down and we documented exactly what each team was doing. This gave us a lot of efficiency And, oh, I'm sorry, I'm totally standing in front of this. It gave us a lot of efficiency, and it also helped us really pinpoint, okay, hey, they don't have X skill, well, that's sales training. Or, hey, we need a new one sheet, oh, come to this. So this kind of charter system really helped us be clear on who was doing what and move faster. Then I moved into training and comms, and I didn't just think about like, hey, how do I train my sellers? I also thought, how do I train those influencers? It wasn't enough just to build documentation. I actually had to get them on board with it. And so one of the things we did for sales leaders is we tied engagement with our program to performance. So we would expose like, hey, here's a low performer on your team. They're not using anything that we've made available to them. And we put the onus on the sales leader to actually do that coaching. Like, we don't even have to do it. It's like, hey, like, just so you know, this is what this dude's doing. Like, take that for what you will. And then on the sales support and cross-functional, again, it wasn't just about, hey, like, can you help us, can you do this process? It was actually about training them on that. And so with sellers and across all these folks, because we were moving everything to one tool and we were super, super focused on one thing at the time, which was driving a behavior change. And that behavior change was, have you checked Seismic yet? I know it's really, really simple, but it was just like, this is your one-stop shop, go there. And so everyone in the organization learned when a seller asked for something to say, well, have you checked Seismic yet? And it actually worked. It's like, let me Google that for you, right? On the sales side, some of the things I did is I created a watering hole. We had a Slack channel. Anytime a seller asked a question, we promised a really quick response. The other day, somebody asked something and with like 3 seconds, they had like 10 different people on my team answer. So we always make sure we're quick to respond. And then I tried the model of just like going everywhere that they were. I created self-service training videos for somebody who's like, hey, I'm hopping on this flight. I'm in the car. I'm just trying to learn what I'm doing here. So we did that. I had office hours where I said, hey, I'm hanging out on Zoom for the next hour. Come find me. And then I went into their different meetings and worked with the sales leaders to create specific trainings for their teams. And then sales onboarding classes. Something that I didn't really account for when I first rolled this out, and maybe something to work with product as a product marketer or work with your product marketing team, is one of the things I didn't understand was the nuances of like their daily workflow and their role. And so when I rolled out this training, what I did was first I started from a role perspective. So I said, hey, you're an account executive. Like, that looks a lot different than your role as a customer success manager. And I always framed it in the what's in it for you. That was like a huge missing thing for me. As a seller, why should you use this content? Because it's going to help you, or this program, it's going to help you close more deals. And then I would actually demo Seismic, and I'd say, imagine you get a new lead and you don't know anything about this persona. Come into Seismic, see the PDF. Oh, like, you got a call with them? Here's some discovery questions. By the way, once you get to that proposal stage, we got you covered. And then, like, if at any time you get hung up on the Salesforce process, just log into Seismic and you have all your documentation there. That looks really different than what we would talk about with CSMs. Where we would say, hey, drive engagement, here's all the stuff around the product. So just really those nuances, that's something I didn't think about at first. And then metrics for us, just kind of rounding out, we focus on deal size, right? Are we getting to that B2B enterprise motion? We focus on attribution, is what product marketing doing, moving the needle? And then we also focus on sales NPS. Sales is our customer. Are they happy and are they satisfied? At this point, we tested and validated anything. We didn't think about launch until we actually knew that this was going to work. And so I went back to those folks I interviewed and I said, hey, like, you're our beta customers, get access first. I was testing, is the communications working? Is the content working? Am I targeting them with the right message? Is it relevant? So we really validated that the program was working before we even launched it. And then we moved into launch. This is something that, like, go to market, product marketing, like, I do this launch motion all the time. I think some of the nuances for me were around this was, one, making sure I understood like what launching to sales was versus like launching to a global market. Making sure that I ran everything by sales leaders before I tried to launch stuff to get them on board. And then also making sure I was actually tracking metrics at that time and launching to all those different folks that we talked about. So what were we able to do? Within just a few months of launching, we got 90% adoption of our sales enablement tool Seismic, and we had 60% of sellers being daily active users, and we had a really high NPS. So there was a lot of engagement there. There's some Slack messages up here where for that proposal tool that we had created, it's consistently the #1 used tool, and it's also helped us land one of the biggest deals in our company history. I've had sellers send me notes saying, hey, like, I work in the government space. I have to create these on the daily. Like, you've saved me so much time. Another seller moved into a new role, and he was immediately able to land an increase on a deal. I don't put these up here to humble brag about myself. Like, this took a lot of work to build this trust and get to this point. And so it can be thankless, but like, you can get there. And then on the last thing, they always felt, these are really small, I'm sorry. They always felt like we were there. Like, that was the #1 thing. They said, like, you are always there, Sapphire. And I was like, wow, like, that feels good. And as a result, our deal size went up and we were able to hit our numbers. So then moving into iteration, like, how do I actually analyze data and make recommendations? So the first thing I was focused on was, how do I make quick pivots? And so this is actually something I learned from my friends at Seismic, and kind of through this coaching process, was this idea of enablement readiness versus sales readiness. And so as a product marketing team, we were really, really good at having the market context figured out, at having a process, at having content, having tools, basically everything until that seller like received the content was like tip-top shape. What wasn't there was some of the sales readiness. And so they didn't have the context they needed. They didn't have maybe the skills or the competencies, and they weren't incentivized to use it. And so one of the ways that we quickly pivoted on that is we built out, I can go back. Someone's taking a picture. Yeah, that's cool. I can send out these slides. Cool. So one of the things that we did was we quickly pivoted. So rather than just having all this content and tool, we built out enablement decks where we had everything that they would need to, tackle. It was role-based and it was topic-based. So in this instance, we have like Pluralsight for, cloud computing. Why would you use it? And so this was how we did it. I went into team meetings and actually trained on it. So it wasn't just a self-service model. I actually went into the team meetings and I talked about, so specifically for a pitch deck, why did we create it this way? Like, what research went into it? Have customers already responded to this? That was something that I really learned around making sure they were ready, is having testimonials from customers who had actually received the materials to say, we showed this to customer X and they said Y, and it ended up in this for sales. So I started launching things with sales success stories where not every piece of content, but major pieces of content would be attributed to a deal. Like when I go out and I launch a product, there's always a case study or testimonial or reference that comes with that. And so I did the same thing for when I was launching these different sales assets to say, this person had this success and you can too if you do X, Y, and Z. And I also taught them how to use the deck, right? Like, I'm somebody who loves storytelling. I love digging in. I love tailoring what I'm saying. And so I kind of focused on how to do that. So it was just really quick pivots. Another thing was metrics. I know this can be like a hairy area. There's so many things that can go wrong in trying to get to metrics. And we thought content usage in Seismic was going to directly lead to attribution. Due to some system and data issues on our side, and also just like not being able to drive some specific behaviors, we weren't able to get there. And so we had to introduce a new step where we looked at content usage. And then we said, okay, you seller XYZ, LMNOP, you're using this content. Let's talk to you. Let's look at your NPS scores. Let's do some interviews, figure out where you've used it. And then we get attribution. So we would start posting like deal reviews on Slack saying, hey, this person used this thing and this happened. And so it was really a way for us to actually get attribution. We're not getting all of it, but we're getting some of the credit and understanding where we're moving the needle. I want to talk a little bit about my last couple minutes. Here's some of the long-term pivots that we had made. So now we're 2.5 years later after kind of building the system, and we have a system that works. It always needs tweaks, but in this kind of iterating phase, I like to call them like our event team influencers. Our events team came to us and they said, hey, we have a conference. Our sellers now have a quota to sell tickets to our conference, and they're not doing it. So once we dug in, we understood that it was an unclear value to sales. They didn't know, like, why should I sell tickets to marketing's conference? I literally could care less. They didn't understand how to sell the conference, right? Like, come see our keynote speaker. Like, ain't nobody coming for that reason, buddy. There was a gap in tools and there was no best practices. And so what I did was I went out and reframed the why, and I created how to sell playbooks. And so I kind of stripped out the data here. But basically, we had this whole campaign of invite your customers to Pluralsight Live, and you'll get 3x deal size. Here's some examples of top sales performers. They've sold a ton of tickets. Here's examples of amount of money that's been closed. So we looked at like pipeline, we looked at dollars closed. So really reframing it and positioning it to like what they actually care about, which is dollars in their pocket. We also created materials that they could tailor to different personas because they mentioned that that was a gap. And then from there, I put everything into playbooks. We knew from our personas that we had some sellers who would spend 30 minutes going through an entire playbook because they were brand new and they wanted to ramp up really quickly. And then we had those enterprise sellers who were like, hell no, I'm not spending 30 minutes on anything. So we created a checklist. We kind of were satisfying for both of the, we were trying to solve for both of those people at the same time. And it wasn't just about, hey, here's a tool. It was, hey, here's a tool, here's how we'd use it. But like, if you have a better way, come shout at us. And then we launched it. And so I went out and I evangelized in meetings. I went to a ton of different sales meetings. We have a field marketing team and sales leaders that we partnered with really closely to make sure that they were actually driving usage. And one of the biggest things that I did, I just heard the last woman talking about videos, is I actually created self-service videos. And so every single month I would come, because like we're starting that sales process for our conference. Like it's a long sales cycle, right? Where, hey, like we just had our conference in August, we're already starting to sell more tickets. And so every single month I would have a video that said, this is what's in it for you. Here's a success story from last year. Here's some event updates. So they would get those crucial communications that we had created. And oh, by the way, here's a reminder of all the tools that we've created and how to use them. So it's kind of that repeat exposure and just making sure that I was launching it. So if I could leave you with, I know we covered like a ton. I told you up front, I love to talk, and I'm like really passionate about this because it's kind of just something I fell into. And it's just been like, there is nothing better than like when I go to our sales kickoff and everyone's around and like, it's just like, I did not have that trust with my sellers previously, and being able to build that was just so valuable for me because like people always like, you should be in sales. I'm like, I would hate to be in sales. Like that is such a hard job. And so anything I can do to make it easier, I'm really passionate about. So if I could leave you with anything, it would definitely be treat sales like your customer. Make sure you know them intimately and are really solving for their problems. Use your go-to-market skills. We all have them. Whether you're in a product marketing side or sales enablement side, you're working on this. So make sure you use those skills. And the last thing is make sure you fail fast to the framework and iterate, right? We got it wrong like more times than we ever got it right, but we moved quickly, and that's how we built that trust. So that's a product marketing perspective on scaling our sales enablement. Oh. Thank you.
No questions? No questions.
Questions, sure, yeah. Cool, we have time.
How about that tie sales leaders quota to the usage? How did you get people buying on that?
Thank you.
So we didn't tie quota, yeah, so that's a good clarifying. So we didn't tie quota, so we actually expose usage of all the different tools and engagement, like, hey, did you actually come to all these different trainings? Did you watch this content? So we actually exposed that to our sales leaders, and then we had them coach their sellers based on performance. So when they were in a one-on-one with their sellers, and the person's like, yeah, I'm just not hitting my numbers, like the person didn't respond to me, they're like, well, actually, you have all of these things at your disposal, and you're not using it. And Jim over there is a really high performer and he's using everything. So like, where's the gap? And then they might come out and say, oh, well, the content wasn't working. And like, that's a great reason for them to come to us and then say, hey, this isn't working. So it was really just about like giving sales leaders access to what their teams were actually doing so they could use it to coach in their own way.
Yeah, salespeople have like a real aversion to being on an exception list. Yeah. You know? I mean, I don't know. It's like unnatural.
Yeah.
I still do too. I'm good doing nothing. And then all of a sudden, if everybody's doing it and I'm not, and there's a list, I'm in trouble, right?
Exactly. So we would have like leaderboards for like, I know sales leaderboards, but like we would just be like, hey, these are the top people, like go out, chase the success. So I knew that after, yeah. No, so that's a great question. So when I first started at Pluralsight, we had a brand new product marketing team, and then we had a sales training and productivity team that was sitting under our CRO. And then from there, it's evolved into a sales enablement team that reports into like our strategy organization now, which is a little bit funky, but it's a brand new sales enablement team. So now that slide that I showed on like the different responsibilities, it's changing a little, but there was a lot of like rub around the handoff at first, because we're doing a lot of the same things, and there was a lot of recreating the wheel. So it was definitely an effort in learning how to collaborate. I can't.
So when you initially shared the first slide, you showed that it took you 2.5 years, well, this is 2.5 years later, right?
Yeah.
When in that process, you dedicate the time to very thoughtful.
Yeah. Totally. I think I spent most of my time in, like I said, discovery and development. That's where I spent, and it wasn't just me doing discovery. Like, I had folks on my team and say, hey, go do this interview, like with a sales leader or a seller, go do this thing. So like, I basically said, like, I took like probably a month or two to really figure out, like, this is what I want to do. And then I got people on my team to help me do those things. And then I came back, I analyzed everything, and then I developed it. It wasn't overnight. I think the thing I learned about sales enablement is you have a lot of partners in the business. It's not just about you doing it. So like I said, sales ops is super motivated to get the right sales behaviors and understanding how to use the tool. So I'd say, can you create documentation on what you need and what sales needs to do? And then I'll get it uploaded into the system. So it was really just about like figuring out like, what is some of the process things? Who do I need to do it? And giving them some deadlines. So I didn't do everything myself. And this didn't all happen at once. So it was just really about understanding who in the business could help me and making sure that they got it done.
Is the sales enablement piece as the strictly product marketing, is that part of the pipeline?
Yeah, so we look at it from a pipeline perspective. Yeah, but it's not perfect for us. Like, we don't have one view that says, here's all the dollars that product marketing has impacted. We just haven't been able to get there yet. So we're still learning, we're still growing.
But there's an attempt.
Yes, there's an active attempt to do it.
I think it's tough when you look at it, depending on the length of your sales cycle. We've had to go inside of the sales cycle and look at conversion rates at different stages of the selling motion, right? Because I can't wait, let's say, on an 18-month sales cycle and I've got a new hire seller. I can't wait 18 months to find out if he knows what he's doing. She may or may not be getting pipeline coming to them. And so we have to measure, within the selling motion a little bit.
Yep.
All right, well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
All right.